Listen to the rumble. Listen to the roar. Slowly in 3. They'll be flying off 4. Watch them now.
We are sitting here in the legendary Hoffman Race Shop, which is at the Hoffman Farm. And if you're not familiar with if you're not familiar with the Hoffman team, obviously they are a legendary, long-time sprint car racing team, IndyCar team, and their farm they race out of is it's always neat to bring people here because they're with race shops and even today. With sprint cars today, a lot of the shops are the NASCAR looking beautiful, shiny glossy floors, immaculate, everything white, and this isn't. This is the old farm. It's awesome. It's clean, but it's an old farm. It's old buildings, and it immediately takes you back. You know that there's lots of history here, and these guys have raced out of this farm for nearly 80 years. And we're sitting with Dan Launderville. And Dan, what was your title here for many years?
Officially, I believe I was called the Vice President of Operations, which entailed everything from scrubbing toilets to building chocks to fabricating to whatever it took.
Yeah.
I was, for the bulk of my time here, I was the single full-time employee. And then at a couple of different times, I was joined by guys by the name of Jake Simmons and Brian Gainey, who helped us out, and we brought our Silver Crown car in-house.
Very cool. I know the way I remember it, because I grew the history I have with Hoffman's is when you pull out of their driveway, there's a Kroger's across the street. That was a cornfield, and on the other side of that cornfield was my dad's house where he grew up.
I remember your dad saying that.
Always coming over here when he was a kid. And I remember, we were always Hoffman fans, and we'd come over here a couple times a year and check things out. And I remember coming into this garage when Rich Vogler was driving for him, and Joey Kerr and I came in here and saw the Vogler cars, and that was a big thing for us because he was our hero. And I remember they hired you, and it was basically, it was a guy hiring a guy to run this place and keep the cars going and put cars together and put them back together when they're hurt and get them ready and prep them. And it's, as everyone knows, that's a full-time job. You can try to do it in the evenings throughout the week with a job, and it's almost impossible.
Yeah, it don't work that way.
But I know a little bit about your past. The only thing I know is you grew up out in Iowa, and you were into racing. You ran go-karts, and you were into all kinds of racing, and you placed an ad to it.
No, Richard had an ad in the Speed Sport, and I by chance just happened to, I didn't have a subscription to Speed Sport, just happened to pick one up
now, what
in a mall.
Were you racing karts or big cars? What were you doing at that point?
At the time,
how old were you? This is years ago. This is 15 years ago?
20? I worked for him 18, so I was
late 90s?
Yeah, late 90s. I was just in my early 20s, and I was working at a Chevrolet dealership in my hometown, and kind of decided I was over that, didn't really want to do that anymore, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I always wanted to race. And I went back to school full-time to just try and figure something else out, went to a community college, and we grew up racing a lot. My dad always took me to Knoxville to watch races, and
was your dad a racer or just into it, just a fan?
He raced a little bit. My Aunt Carol and Uncle Dern actually got us into it, and they raced a lot. And Dern's brother Gary, he raced full time back in the day.
Yeah.
And my dad would help them, and he raced a little bit with them. My dad did, and when us kids came along, they kind of slowed down their stock car racing, and we started into more go-karts. And from the time I was just barely old enough to walk, we were going to racetracks, and we had four-wheelers, three-wheelers, motorcycles. Yeah. We were just, always out raising hell and having a good time. And I can remember, and my Aunt Carol telling us a story. She said, you know, the neighbors would call. We'd be out on our motorcycles, and neighbors would call and say, "You see what them kids are doing?" And she'd say, "You know, it's just better not to watch. If they need something, they'll come in."
That's right.
So, yeah, we always had a good time. Yeah, but that's where it started. I'd walked into, in a mall in Des Moines, there was a racing kind of related store that just had, you know, just posters, magazines, stuff like that. Maybe not necessarily all racing, but, you know, had a good racing selection, and they had a Speed Sport News. And
that was important before the internet.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In times before internet, you know, like I said before, texting and all that stuff. I mean, that was how you got your news.
Yeah.
And so I picked that up, and Richard had an ad in there. And I was going to school and kind of, I don't know that I want this either. And always wanted to race, and always admired guys like Carl Kinzer and Gary Deuce Turrell and stuff like that, you know, guys that were good. And I thought, you know, maybe I just feel this, call him and see what he wants to do or whatever. And I sent him a resume. And
do you remember what the ad said? Did it just say full-time helper?
I still have the ad somewhere. Cool. It said looking for somebody who want, you know, hard work, long hours, and occasional trips to Victory Lane. And he wasn't shitting about none of them.
Yeah. Wow.
It was, so I called him, and I sent him a resume, and my dad actually came with me out here, and we sat up over there in Old Timer's Flat.
Yeah.
And I talked to Old Timer, and I talked to Richard, and Old Timer got down an old chest press drill.
Yeah.
And he was telling me the story about when he drilled out the crankshaft for their 29 Model T to get, because I guess I had to dipper oil,
Yeah.
and they pressurized it. So he come home from school, and him and Greasy Johnson, I think was what he called him, they would drill out this thing for their first race car.
Wow.
But they spent days drilling this
by hand.
So he shows me this, and he says, "What do you think this is?" And I said, "A cordless drill," and he just started laughing.
You're right.
Yep, exactly.
That is good. That's good. Man. And then did you stay? Did you just have to go back and get your shit and come on this way?
They offered me the job here.
Was this wintertime, or were they right in the middle
No,
of this?
actually, when I walked in, kind of like you, I was not really knowing what to expect. When I walked in, they were doing the deal with Bud and Dawn.
Okay.
And Darland was running a pavement sprint car that was owned by Bud Whitaker and Dawn. I forget Dawn's last name. Anyway, that car was here. They had hurt the motor somewhere. Richard owned the motors in it.
Yeah.
And helped them out with whatever ways they could. I really wasn't familiar with it. And the car was here, and the rear end was out of it, and Rob had actually taken the axle out and was repairing the axle. It had a groove, which was a common thing, the groove in the axle from the seal.
Okay.
And Rob had some two-part epoxy or something that he formulated or come up with and had that in there, and it was sitting here drying, and then they ended up putting it in the lathe and smoothing it back down and getting it, right, and putting it back together. And Richard offered the job, and of course I knew I was going to take it, but I was like, well, let me think about it on the ride back home, because it's a long ride back to Iowa.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know if I said it before, but my dad came with me.
Yeah.
An old timer said, well, it's got to be a good family if, the dad didn't just let the kid go. He come out here to check it out too and make sure. So,
he knew you came from good stock.
Right. So, I went back home and basically knew I was going to do it. And I called him. I said, I'll do it. I said, here's the deal though. I'm going to run with you 1 year, and I'm going back home.
Yeah.
And 1 year became 18.
Wow.
So,
no kidding.
Yeah.
Damn. How long did it, who was driving for him then? Was it Bud or it was?
Darland. Yeah, he was running dirt and pavement for him.
How long did it take before you got to visit Victory Lane like the ad said?
It was actually relatively quick. So that was when Kroger first came on board too.
Yeah.
So
That was mixed emotions for me because I loved seeing him finally get some help and a good name. And Kroger's a Cincinnati name. It made sense.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
awesome. But I grew up with the red, white, and black 69s, and that was just an iconic car.
That was a car, yeah.
And when the Kroger deal came along, I was doing artwork and concept drawings, and Richard had me do drawings.
That's right, yeah.
With like fluorescent colors and blues and all this, and I remember thinking like, yeah, I get it, but man, just
that's not it. That's not the Hoffman car.
That's not the Hoffman car, exactly. and it, and it's been that way ever since. And in fact, when Mean Green came along and I leaned on Richard, I said, you should go back to the red, white, and black. And he wouldn't. And then when we did the little 500 car, I was like, let's do the red, white, and black. And he still wouldn't do it. But we're sitting here in the shop looking at all these pictures on the wall, and you can see the red, white, and black.
Yeah, and everything.
Butler and Vogler and all them guys in it. So,
yeah.
So you visited Victory Lane pretty quick then.
I think one of the first races I did with them, we come out and they were in Nazareth, Pennsylvania at a Silver Crown race. I wheeled in here. I hooked up a Mold Blue pickup. I had an 89 Chevy with a half-ton two-wheel drive, no AC AM radio.
Yeah. And
my goal was, when I moved out here, everything I had I could move myself.
Nice.
And I kept it that way for a very long time. I wanted to be able to move on my own because I realized that there was never no guarantee.
Yeah.
It was a handshake deal, and when he was tired of me and I was tired of him, time to move on, and I didn't know when that would be.
Yep. Been around racing enough to know that's not uncommon.
Yep. Just live light, Yeah. And I still to this day have a lot of stuff at my parents' place, but over time I've kind of migrated and brought stuff back, and now I look at stuff that I've got and I'm like, how did I end up with so much junk? I moved here and I could carry everything myself.
When from the time you walked in here, you mentioned Rob Hoffman. Rob's the son of Richard, and Rob was crew chief and very involved, and Rob does a lot of fabricating and machining. He's a sharp guy.
Oh, yeah.
I hope to talk to him. What, over the first year or maybe the first 5 years, what was the major things that you immediately thought to yourself, we got to change this, we need to do this better, maybe we could change this? And was Richard open to that kind of stuff, or was it, this is the Hoffman way and you're going to do it our way?
No, Richard, I think one of the things that made him kind of so unique was he led from the trenches. He would never ask you to do something he wouldn't do. I always heard a lot of horror stories of guys, they go to work for a guy and they're washing his car and, cutting his grass at his house. And these are things that don't win races. These are things that, Richard always, he told me, he said, I don't care what hours you work, as long as the car's ready to go.
Cool.
And when he gave you a responsibility, he gave you full responsibility. He wouldn't sit there and micromanage. He wouldn't do nothing. He would tell you if you're on the wrong track. He would offer suggestions.
Cool.
But he would let you make your own decision.
Yeah.
Because
man, that's huge.
Pain enhances learning. And
those lessons you remember those lessons.
Right. And he was very good at that. And he would help. When you did something that failed, he would sit down and kind of go over it with you. And maybe these are the things where we took a wrong turn. These are what we need to work on. And when you did something right, he was there to help celebrate and
cool.
Here's what we can learn from it. And so it was
excellent. Very cool. Did you and Rob click right away?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I learned by doing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first nights we were here, I've always been the type, one of the guys that was very influential in helping me getting started was a guy by the name of Larry Killam, who built go-kart motors back at home. And Larry's very sharp, very, very good. The guy is amazing on a milling machine and a lathe. He to stand back and watch him work is just watching a master go at it. It's wonderful. But Larry was one of the ones that taught me, the rule book tells you what you can't do.
Yeah.
And nowhere it don't tell you what you can do.
Yeah.
All the rest of it's up to you.
Yeah.
And when I come out here, we still had printed USAC rule books at the time.
Yeah.
And, of course, that, you had to have the rule book with you at all times. And I within the first few nights, we're sitting down looking over the rule book, and Rob's like, this rule's for us, this rule's for us, this rule's for us. And I'm like, yeah, I'm with the right group here.
Yeah. Vogler had a lot to do with
that.
Oh, yeah.
That's
cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. You're exactly right. You're with the right guys when they're pointing that stuff.
Yeah.
I know Rob and Vogler worked close, and they worked a lot together. They designed their own chassis and really pushed the limits.
Yeah.
They changed. The limits they pushed not only created rules, but it created ways of doing things on sprint cars that we still do today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that says something.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Man. So now you're here for 18 years, many championships. How many championships have you been involved in?
I really don't know. 5 or 6, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many different drivers you have been through?
No, I don't.
Is it under or over 50?
Oh, well over 50. We did 13 or 14 in 1 year. I mean, it was just, and some people kind of got offended by that or whatever. They think, well, you guys must be hard to get along with or whatever. But that was never what it was about. I mean, we had a lot of guys that drove for us or drove for Richard, and I mean, you really got along well with them, but it just didn't work. I mean, we just weren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And we didn't go there to have fun.
Yeah.
To be, we wanted to have fun, but to us, fun was winning.
I've noticed that with the Hoffman car, they might stick a driver in it, and he'll drive for a whole season or maybe just 2 races. And Richard had told me like, it just wasn't jiving. And then a year and a half, 2 years later, that guy might be back in the car.
Yeah,
absolutely. No hard feelings. Like,
Nope.
You're right back in it.
Right.
And maybe it works the second time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you show up and you're
Maybe
you're the same people. We were the same team, but we're at different spots in our career. And maybe this time when the paths cross, they match up and off you go. I mean, it's.
And this is a question I ask a lot of guys that are into sprint car racing that have years invested. Over your 18 years you were here, what's some of the things that strike you as big changes or stuff that really, big improvements or something that really changed things for sprint car racing? Inventions, ways of doing things. I mean, you saw the sway bars come in and go out. What else?
Really, as far as
has chassis design really came a long way, or is it pretty where it needs to be?
They make small strides, but I mean, we went, like you said. I mean, we had front sway bars and coil front bar rears.
You saw a lot happen with shocks.
All them things. Yeah, I mean, shocks were a big deal. And continue to be. Sometimes I think guys make a little bit more of an excuse out of it. My shocks were, wrong or adjusted different, or I don't believe in most of that. I mean, you watch the guys that are really good. They tend to not really mess with that stuff. They focus on what they're doing with the car, where they put the car on the track, and go from there. It's the cars have changed. Probably the biggest thing really is just safety, and that's more for the driver than anything. Because I mean, it was still
when you started, there were no containment seats.
No, yeah, I mean, and a guy was
in an arm.
Yeah, maybe a hook under your thing. And when I started, it was still before, or maybe when they were starting to introduce cage nets.
So
them guys would crash and they'd come in and their seat would be laid wide open and, and the steering wheel all bent up, and they get out and hobble away and, show up the next day, and they'd step back in the car, and you'd just stand up on the Nerf bar and put your foot on the side of the seat and push it back in so it wrapped around him again and push him off for hot laps, and off we'd go.
I'm guilty of that. I remember my dad, every week at Lawrenceburg, having Dad step up in the car and tighten the seat up.
Yeah, just for normal G's.
To tell him, like, I need the ribs tightened up, and he'd stand on the car and push the seat in with his foot, and oh yeah, that's better.
Yeah. When we were going through all them drivers at that time, of course, now you almost need a seat fit for your driver.
Yeah. That's funny. We went from guys carrying a steering wheel to carrying their seat.
Yeah, exactly. We used to just keep a 15-inch seat in-house because when Jerry Coon started driving for us, he needed like a 14 or 14 and a half seat. And the 15 was just a little bit taller, and it got old Jerry right under the armpits there. Yeah. But we kept that 15 because it would fit, a bigger guy like Darlin. You could kick it out, and he could get in there. He'd make it work. Yeah. Or a smaller guy like Jerry or Tracy Hines, you could fold that in around him. But I can remember, we got a picture here somewhere over there by the popcorn machine, I think. But the seats hitting Jerry right under the armpits, and his elbows, or kept his elbows up. He was
whether he had a choice to or not.
Right?
Damn. You just mentioned Hines, and you had told me once, I think I asked you, we were bullshitting, and I think I asked you about drivers that could feel the car the most and tell changes. And you told me about Hines and said that he was really good about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Tell me about him. And you had mentioned, I think it was Hines, you mentioned would call and tell you about stuff to do on the car, and then he'd come in and walk around the car and know if it was changed and different or not.
One of the things we may or may not have been guilty of through the years is maybe trying a little bit too much stuff, or venturing off the beaten path quite a ways. And there was more than a few times Tracy would show up, because one of the things that really kind of surprised me was there wouldn't be a lot of interaction between, at least at my level, there wasn't a lot of interaction with the driver through the week.
Yeah.
And sometimes those guys would venture off. You might not see them for 2 or 3 weeks. They'd be off running midgets, Silver Crown cars, whatever, off away, and we'd just be here, working on our stuff. And so you may go a couple weeks without hearing anything from them. And Tracy was always good. He'd walk up. He'd just walk up, and he had a good eye, and he'd just kind of look around and go, "Why do we change bird cages? Why do we? Why is that front axle that way?" And he just, he was cool. Sharp, and he always said, "I don't have the most talent." And that wasn't true. He was very talented, but he was also very sharp and attention to detail.
That's cool.
And you'd asked me earlier, one of the things that I had brought to these guys, and one of them was, just like you said, organization. And that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff going on. They got so much stuff here, from offie parts from back in the day to, current day stuff. And that was one of the things that, I focused on when I came here, was just getting things organized, so we spent less time looking for parts and more time working on the parts and putting them on the car.
That's good theory.
Yeah.
Man, that's cool. I'm trying to remember, my dad went to a tire test at Winchester, and John Mugavin called Dad one day and said, "Hey, I'm flying to Winchester for a tire test." And they jumped in John's old airplane.
Fabric.
It's an old airplane that, if you're not really comfortable with flying, it's not the one you want to go in. And they flew to Winchester, and Dad said they went there, and Hines was in your guys' car, and you guys were tire testing. And I'm not sure if you were there for that or not, but Dad was impressed with Tracy would get pushed off. You guys would put a setup on the car. Mostly it was just tires the whole day. You guys would put a setup on the car, and Tracy would get pushed off, go out, on the throttle, run 1-2 laps, come in, and tell you what had changed. Change it and go back out.
Yep.
And just needed like 2 laps to know what had changed. And Dad tells a story that towards the end of the day that you guys had something you wanted to try that was a little out of the box. And Dad said he remembers everyone was kind of a little more quiet, like, "I don't know if this is going to work." And Tracy, when he was getting in the car, said, "Hey, wake them boys in the ambulance up. This is going to be a fast one."
That was actually when we were qualifying one time there. Yeah.
I remember
Richard wanted the track record. He used to have the track record.
Dad said that. You guys were trying to get the track record.
Yep. And we had mostly, the team was made up of a lot of people and a lot of volunteer help who, over the years, but I can remember, this is back before we had the big L-shaped wrenches to tighten the wheels up. We're still using a wheel knocker, and if anybody knows, we still have it over there. It's about the world's heaviest wheel knocker that we carried with us. And I can remember John Hillary walking back, and he had already tightened the wheels, and he grabbed that wheel knocker and he walked over and banged on them a few more times. I said, John, them are tight. And he says, yeah, but Tracy just looks at, make sure they're tight, boys, because we're going to go out and set us one. He said, I feel I can hold my breath for 2 more laps.
Jeez. Wow.
And Winchester I'm kind of sorry I missed the last race up there, or hopefully it's not the last race.
I know, I did too,
but
I told myself it won't be the last one.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, you and me both. Watching guys, I couldn't imagine. Richie Vogler was before my time, but watching some of those guys get around there just had to be amazing. And just back through history, some of them guys.
Yeah.
Man.
It might have been Heinz Carr that you had. I came over here one day and you had showed me the strut braces you put on the steering column because that stuff was slick. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
How that came about.
When Rob and Kurt Stemmer were working on their cars when they built the home-built Hoffman cars.
Yeah. And that's like the mid-tube.
And Rob did,
yeah.
Yep. Rob initially was an engineering student and, really understood that the car really needed to be rigid. And you have suspension on it to do the suspension's job, not the frame being floppy and bouncing around. So he did a lot of X-bracing and to keep the car rigid. And at the time we were running Beast cars, and we were just sitting out here one night with the thing, probably broke a motor, had a motor sitting out here, car just idling in the driveway, and Rob had grabbed a hold of the steering wheel and, was going to turn it left and turn it right just to get the power steering fluid moving and so we could check the level and that. And he would turn that, and you could just watch the steering gear go fore and aft in that car.
Really?
And we got some pictures here. Winchester is just a wicked, wicked place. We've got pictures of, it was Tracy and Richard's car in that Beast car. And his hands, they would normally start out with their hands, like their left hand at 11 o'clock and the right hand at about 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And Tracy, he's got his right hand at 12 and his left hand at 6.
So he's full cut left almost.
And the front wheels are nearly straight.
Really?
And you're just looking at the compliance in there. Yeah, you're just looking at it going,
something's not, something between his hands and the front's not getting there.
So I think Rob was kind of working on that at that time. And actually, Jerry Coons was the one that we went up and did another practice up at Winchester. And if I'm not mistaken, it was just me. I think it was just Richard and Jerry and myself went up. And Jerry had run dirt for us, and Richard, he had talked Richard into putting him into the pavement car, and he just wasn't real comfortable at Winchester. And so we went up to get some laps, and Richard always believed in, the scientific method, and Rob as well. And we like to do kind of blind tests with the drivers. We would not really tell them what we were doing. And just here, did it make it better, make it worse? Really no change.
Cool.
So
they don't get wrapped up in what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. To try and divorce yourself because it is all about the driver. It's they sometimes get a little wrapped up in something and no, that won't work.
Yeah, they convince themselves before they even go out.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, we went up there and Rob had we just put some short radius rods up in the cockpit, and man, that just made that thing so rigid. And Jerry went out, we did 2 different tests. We did he put an idler on the drag link, so it came off the pitman arm to this idler, and then to another one, which got rid of bump steer.
Yeah.
And we did both tests, and Jerry went out, and we put an original drag link, just a standard long drag link on it, and then went back to the double one, and he come back in. He's like, eh. And then we took the bars out of the cockpit, took them off.
Yeah.
And he come back in. He said, well, that thing with the bump steer, it was better, but not that big of a deal. He said, but put them bars back in here.
I want those.
Yeah, I want those.
Wow.
So cool. Yeah, and that was something that Rich Meserow from we met him when he was at Triple X. He's worked a lot on that over the years, and you can just watch it. I mean, just still in even today, just the compliance in the steering, and I mean it gets a little spooky, especially at a place like Winchester, because I mean Winchester tests everything. If something's marginal, Winchester will find it.
It's going to weed it
It's
out.
going to break.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's wild up there.
I tell people that go to Winchester, so you got to go down in the infield, go down to 3 and 4 and stand in the infield, and you will realize that when you watch a car come through there, you're looking through the top of the cage down on the driver.
Yep.
And it'll dawn on you, that place is so banked, you're looking through the top of the cage. And I've heard drivers say that they got to, when in the turns, you don't look forward, you look up.
Yep.
To the left.
Tracy and Jerry both would have us take the sun visor off the car.
Yeah.
Because that's where they're looking to look down the track. Oh, it's crazy.
That's wild. Man, unreal.
Did you ever run there?
No.
No, you never ran there?
I wanted to. I ran vintage cars there, and got some hot laps there, some fast ones.
What? Right.
That was a blast.
Yeah. And it's impressive.
And it was enough it was enough to know, damn, this is fun, and damn, this is spooky.
Yeah.
One of them deals. You just.
Well, I can remember. I don't remember who it was. One of the California guys, back in the '60s or whatever. And I remember if it was Richard saying it or Old Timer or somebody, be like, when they'd show up, they'd walk up, look at the track, and go back and puke behind the stands.
Jeez.
And then, kind of try and compose it. And
Unreal. That's wild. On the cars, you've been through a bunch of different chassis and whatnot. With any kind of sprint car racing, you're going to crash, you're going to tear stuff up. That's just part of it. Like changing tires.
Yep.
And I want to talk about some of the long nights you've had to putting cars back together. And you mentioned one last night. You guys were running for the Eldora Million. And
the Mopar Million.
Built a car in one night. Tell us the whole story there from the beginning of showing up. You had 2 cars in the show, right?
Yeah.
Was this the first Mopar Million?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
You're gonna pay $1 million to win for a sprint.
No, it was a $1 million purse.
Okay.
Yep. $250,000 to win. I think it was
$250,000 to win for sprint cars.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
And I remember wing guys, midget guys, everyone showed up.
So that was, kind of talking about the cars and stuff. I mean, I guess that was 03, I think it was. And Tracy Hines J.J. Yaley was running them F5 twisters that Wayne Simmons put together from Iowa at Knoxville. And cleaning up, and Tracy kind of talked us into, maybe we need to try one of them. We was running a Stealth at the time, very nice cars.
Yeah.
So we got a car from Wayne and got it here, and we ran with Wayne for a long time. He treated us right, and he's a good guy.
Cool.
We put a car together, and we took it and ran it early in the year, early in 03, and man, the thing was a missile. I mean, that thing was just, it was fast.
At Eldora or everywhere?
Yeah, that was when we started the year at Eldora.
Okay, yeah, the early Eldora show.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we went it wasn't the next night, but it was like a week or so later we went to Terre Haute. And I believe Tracy was fast time, and I don't remember what we did in the heat race. And then in the feature, he whistled it down into one at the start of the race and turned that thing sideways, and just, it was one of them deals where, just about everybody in the field hit him, and, it just destroyed the car. And asked him what happened. He said, man, this thing just handles so good. He said, I tried driving it in like a midget.
Wow.
And it didn't work. So he got all right, and we come back and we needed to get a different car. And so we called up Wayne, and his stuff was starting to take off, and Wayne was kind of a one-man band. He just, he had guys coming in and helping him, but demand started picking up, and he was unable to keep pace. And he got us a car pretty quick. I think he had one built or close to done. and got us another one. And it's kind of funny because if you look at the pictures, you can look at, we just kept the same body or kept putting, but you can look and like the cowl would have like 3 or 4 Zeus holes in it because they weren't really, it's not like today's cars where one panel fits every car that comes off the line. It was, they were kind of tacked close, and, then you just drilled a hole or augered it out to make it work. And I mean, there'd be 3 or 4 holes in the, just depending on what car it was. But anyway, we had taken a car, we'd crashed it, and we did a deal with, we were hunting a car, we needed a car, and Tom Chalk said, hey, I've got 3 cars coming from, or I don't know, maybe it's 4 or 5, I can't remember what it was. I got some cars coming from Wayne. And Tom had a car sitting at his shop, and he said, if you go and transport them 4 cars that I have sitting at Wayne's, if you bring them back to me, I'll give you the car I got sitting here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And, okay, deal. So we sent a guy up to get it, brought it here, put it together, and took it out and ran it. Man, I think I got the story straight. Took it out and ran it, and the thing was just absolutely unbelievably fast.
Sweet.
I mean, it drove forward hard, had good side bite. So no, I'm lying to you. That car did run good. We put it together and we went to Oskaloosa, Iowa to run the Front Row Challenge, that deal they run. And we picked up them cars from Tom. And at the same time, had Wayne get us another car going. We brought them cars back. We had 1 race car, and I believe 4 frame and body stacked in our trailer, upside down. I mean, it was a load. We didn't run real good. Unfortunately, that was the night Hattons, I forget the guy's name that passed away at Oskaloosa that night. But we didn't run all that great, but we came back and we ran Terre Haute. This was with the SCRA.
Okay.
We ran Terre Haute, ran pretty well with them, and then we went to somewhere in Illinois and won that night with Tracy. Got the cars delivered to Tom. We picked up another car along the way and we put it together, and Tracy went out and ran it one night, and he said, no, this thing's awesome. We need to put this thing aside.
Yeah.
And we knew that was our Mopar Million car.
Wow.
Richard wanted to run a second car, so he hired Dickie Gaines to run the second car.
Yeah.
So we put him in that initial car that we put together that we took to Oskaloosa, and we took both of them to Joliet, Illinois. And Joliet wasn't our favorite place. It was a little hard on tires and whatnot, but we did okay. But JJ had rolled out his Mopar Million car, which, if you remember, had that big sail panel on the right side, and he was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And
they were pushing the rules.
Yes, they were. Yeah, they were the ones that read it. And
they had a deal. The body guys were wanting big panels like a wing car.
Yep.
No body panel could go outside the roll bar, so JJ said no problem and built
built the roll bar back there.
Way back there, like a wing.
Yep, not a problem.
Yeah, I love that.
And that was him and Wayne. Him and Wayne had that Mopar Million car for a long time.
Yeah. I remember thinking that's a cool way around the rules, but God, it's ugly.
It's ugly.
I hope they don't do that.
Right. So we came home, and Brian Gainey was working for us at the time, and him and I put and Rob and the whole crew. I mean, we worked forever, because I think that was like 2 weeks before the Mopar Million, and we built 2 bodies out of aluminum, and we took a lot of flack for it. Guys are like, "Yeah, it looks like somebody, installing a furnace or whatever." But we built 2 bodies, and a couple of things I'm kind of proud of still is some of the stuff that we did. You still see on cars to this day, like on Coons' Midgets and stuff, how they got their bodies built.
Yeah.
We just did that in a 2-week period, just put it all together, and
that's cool.
And so it we took them cars up to Eldora and signed in. Like, you had to get there real early, and we was on the back stretch, and they had a lot of cars, and we were just packed in there like sardines.
Wow.
And unloaded our cars, went through tech. We had actually built a little device. We still have one sitting, well, it's a podcast, people can't see it, but over there on the car, the little, for lack of a better word, wing air deflector underneath the car.
Yeah.
They made us cut the bottom of that out at Eldora, and rightly so.
We got to give them something to see and say no. So
exactly.
They
don't look too much. So anyway, we were very good. We were very well prepared. Like I said, we had Brian Gainey working for us at the time, and he and I mean, we were working just hours. It was nothing at that time. I mean, 100-hour weeks were not uncommon.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, I mean, we were just here day and night. Anyway, we go out, and they did qualifying kind of differently. You went out, you had one lap of qualifying, and then they inverted the field. So if you were the last car out, you were the first car out in the second round.
That's pretty cool. Like,
yeah.
For that many cars, you know the track's going to change
Yeah,
night and day.
yeah. And if you drew last, I mean, you were just going to be toast.
Yes.
So that gave the poor guy that drew last, gives him a little bit better shot. But
Yeah.
Tracy went out, and he was just on his game. He, if I remember correctly, his second round of qualifying was good enough to be, if not fast time, like in the top 3 of first round qualifiers.
The whole first round.
Yeah, I mean, he was just on it. And Tracy, I mean, he's a thinking guy. He studied tape. He told me one time he sat and watched, just tape of Jack Hewitt and some of them guys that really knew Eldora. And this is back when Eldora was Eldora, when it was Earl's Eldora.
Yeah.
And the banking and the variances, the difference in banking and that kind of stuff. So, we got crashed in the heat race. And the rule was the fastest 2 qualifiers that do not make it into the field through their heat race get provisionals.
Okay.
So, or qualified for the race. So obviously being fast time,
You're locked in.
we were locked in, but you had to run the car you qualified.
Okay.
And I do remember somebody, Rob or Richard, somebody asking, what part of that car do we have to run? Because, I mean, it tore up the car pretty good.
Yeah.
And we come home, and because of all the other crashed,
What happened in the heat?
him and another guy come up just way early. It was before even the start-finish line.
Yeah.
Just come up and drilled him and knocked him right in the fence.
Damn.
And just flipped it.
Damn.
So we loaded up. We took both trailers up there, the old white trailer up there, and then Big Red. And we had quite a few guys with us. Our buddy Stush from Pennsylvania, he was in. And
How did Gaines qualify? Because at the end of the story, he's going to come back a little bit.
yeah,
So-
not real well.
Okay,
Dickie,
so he was
qualifying
middle.
was never one of Dickie's real strong suits.
Okay.
But
But there's still another car in this fight.
oh yeah. So Rob, Richard, myself, I don't remember who all came back with us. Brian, I'm sure. Yeah, maybe Brian might have stayed up there and led the effort on Dickie's car because Dickie made it through his heat race.
Yeah.
Another thing, we're up there getting ready for our heat race, and Tracy hadn't gone out yet, and Dickie was getting ready to go, and this is before water circulators and those kind of heaters, so we used like a salamander type heater to kind of keep the cars warm, and we'd had it on there and kind of maybe lost a little track of what was going on, and Dickie crawled in his car to get ready to go out and run his heat race, and he looked down and he said, "Hey, water temperature's pegged." And I said, don't worry about it. It's just from the salamander blowing on the left side of the engine, which is where the water temperature bulb was.
Yeah.
And I said, as soon as you fire up and it gets a little water circulating, it'll drop right back down. And so I unplugged it and took the salamander away to let it start cooling. He mentioned it one more time, and then right before we pushed off, he's like, "So just let it go?" And I walked over to the pit cart and grabbed a piece of black duct tape and put it over the water temperature gauge. Just told him to watch where you're going. Don't worry about what them gauges tell you.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Dickie went out, ran well in his heat. I really can't tell you where he finished, but qualified for the race.
Wow. Okay. Good.
And so we knew he was locked in, and Tracy crashed, so we loaded the car up.
How far is Eldora from here? 2.5? 2?
About 2 hours.
2 hours. Okay.
Yep. So like I said, we were packed in there like sardines. How Rob got that damn thing out of there, I have no clue.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Shit.
Because people are having to move and kind of spread aside and give us room to get out. So we
Yeah.
get out, we come back here, the aforementioned cars that we had crashed. We still had plenty of donor cars over there, so we had to cut the right rear lower frame rail out back to the torsion tube. And we had talked. Rob's a very good fabricator, and he we got everything spudded back together, got it put back together. If I'm not mistaken, we probably had the luxury of maybe even getting to go home, take a shower, and maybe grab a hour nap or something.
Jeez.
And then back up to Eldora because we had to be there pretty early the next day. And then they had an alphabet of races. Knowing that we were locked in, we went out for one of the races, and Tracy just tagged the tail and just hung way back.
Oh, that's smart.
Just to run the car and make sure everything was good.
Yeah.
But that was kind of our opportunity to shake it down and let him go out and run it.
Yeah.
So he started, I guess it was last, or second to last, whatever. And I think he ended up in the top 10 somewhere, like 8th or something like that. And anyway, Dickie took off from his starting spot. Richard and Rob were standing up there. Our cars were neon yellow and the neon orange.
Yeah.
And Dickie's car was yellow. And Richard said, I have trouble finding him on the track. Rob, you watch Dickie and I'll watch Tracy, and if we have a red flag, we can communicate with where they are on the track so we can haul her down to, whoever, and we can all disperse to where they're parked at on the track and see if they need anything or whatever.
Yeah.
And so Rob said he started watching Dickie, and Dickie just started methodically working his way through, and Rob said, I about fell off the top when Dickie, he just passed for the lead and just took off driving away. Like,
Damn.
And we're all just standing there going,
What
wow.
the heck? B car.
Yeah, exactly.
No shit.
Dickie, he led that thing for quite a few laps. And Jack Haudenshield, Dickie was running kind of a little bit lower through 1 and 2, and Haud, of course, a master on the fence at Eldora, and
yep. If you leave just enough room for a car, they're gonna do it.
Dickie left him a car width and about a 1/16 of an inch, and old Haud bounced her off the fence and made her through, and took the lead back. And Dickie, I remember Dickie, I don't know if we had a yellow or something, but I remember Dickie motioning, where he needed to be on the track, and it's just kind of hard to tell, where you need to be. Where he was doing was fine.
Yeah.
And I think that yellow was kind of the ultimate undoing. He needed to, give Haud the opportunity to close up and then get, good runs
wow.
So ultimately ended up third. So
man, unreal.
Yep.
God, that's wild.
Yeah, it was.
And what'd that pay for the 2 cars?
I really don't remember. I don't know if it was 175, I guess, something like that. I'm not sure.
Wow. Wow.
It was very good. Richard, we had bought, we got some equipment for it. We got a Lincoln welder that was at the Speedway. It was actually, Lincoln used it at the Speedway for welding. They have a garage there that guys, when they break stuff or whatever, Lincoln has welders there, and they bring it. So we got a deal on that, and then we got a belt sander, a box brake.
Nice.
A digital readout for our I think it's a 1958 Cincinnati milling machine. We got a digital readout for it. So
that's excellent.
Yeah.
Man,
so we got to splurge a little bit.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's
cool. You mentioned Big Red, the hauler. Anyone that knows the Hoffman team knows the Big Red hauler. Tell us the story, how that thing came about, and all your wonderful long hours keeping that thing going.
Yeah, I've got a lot of hours looking through the windshield.
It's funny because the Hoffman team, you guys are, like I tell people that people want to tell me that team, when in USAC racing, they want to say, oh, those guys have money, and I remind them, everybody in USAC's well-funded. When you're at that level, everyone's funded pretty well.
Yep.
And in Hoffman's, you guys have good backing, but you don't have a brand new nice hauler.
No. Yeah, Richard, well, like you said about the race shop, it would have been easy enough for him to, he was in land development. It had been easy enough for him to build a Taj Mahal somewhere. But again, that's not really what does it.
That doesn't win races.
No. And that, Richard was really good at just keeping his eye on the prize. Does it contribute? Does it not?
Yeah.
and, make your decision from there. Big Red, unfortunately, was one of them.
Did you guys get that at a police auction?
He bought it so that was before my time here, but he bought it at a drug auction that they had over in Sharonville, Ohio. And they went over there, and as the story goes, got a number, and they were bidding for it against another. I think the guy maybe run drag cars or maybe some street race cars or something around here in town. Anyway, Richard and this other guy were bidding on it, and Richard ended up winning it or getting the winning bid, and brought it home. It had sat. Bill Nisley at the time told him, the problem with something like that is it sat for a long time. That's just hard on vehicles, and things are going to crop up that just from sitting that aren't maybe necessarily readily apparent. Just doing a visual inspection. Yeah. And sure enough, I think we went through 3 or 4 motors in that thing, and we blew it up a few times.
Yeah. I rode to the little 5 with you guys in it, and it's like pegged at 60, 71 hours.
Yeah. When
Rob was telling me you had to know how to drive that thing, get runs at stuff.
And the thing, it's like a wiggle worm going down the road. You can't really steer it. You just kind of guide it and keep it. Because if you start driving it, you start overdriving it. And you're all over the place. So it's you just kind of guide it down the road, and you get a little too close to the one line, you kind of guide it the other way.
That's pretty good.
A few things we've had. One time we was going up 74. I think maybe we were going to Anderson, and of course pavement racing always started early in the morning. That's why I didn't like it. And we was headed up there, and they were doing line construction on the overhead power lines, and they would have intermittent closures where they would close the road off so they could drop the power lines down or whatever, string them across and get them raised up or whatever. We're busting along. Of course, it's 8 in the morning or whatever it is, or not necessarily bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and Rob rolls out of the gas and the throttle pedal stuck.
Oh shit.
That's what he said. And I'm just kind of sitting over there half asleep, and I look over, and he's like got this panic look on his face. He shoves it up in neutral, hits the key, cuts the key off, and just stands on the brake pedal.
Oh shit.
And we got that thing low down, and we ended up rolling it. We got the throttle unstuck, and we had to hop in the trailer and get a pair of vice grips, and vice grip, the throttle cable had broken, somehow wedged, and hung it open.
And who knows how long Rob had been wide open for,
That's how you had to drive it. You didn't,
Yeah, it could have been wide. It could have been stuck miles ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, he somehow got it wound down, and we got some vice grips out and vice gripped it to the pedal, the cable, and then made it onto Anderson, but the thing had run about quarter throttle, if I remember right. So every time we come up to a stop sign, he'd have to kick it in neutral and it'd sit there and rev.
Oh, man. Damn. That's awesome. That old hauler's got some stories to it.
Oh, if that thing could talk.
They need that thing at the Knoxville Hall of Fame.
The guys at the Eastern Motor Museum actually had talked about wanting it.
Yeah, it's an icon of the sport.
It is. That thing's got some miles.
Tell me about. I know you guys have had over 50 drivers for you, tons of guys racing for you, and we could sit here and talk about drivers all day, but one I want to hear about is Kyle Larson. We're looking at a car here, and when Kyle came along, I tell my nephews and other people that are in the sport right now that might be newcomers, pay attention to that when Kyle came along, and Christopher Bell, pay attention, because in 20, 30 years, you're going to want to stick your chest out and say, yeah, I saw that.
I watched him run.
Yeah. And he was in sprint cars for such a short time because, he was well on his way, Kyle. And he climbed in your guys' sprint car and literally won every time he climbed in it. And there's a car here that he won. I remember growing up when Hewitt swept the 4 Crown, it was life-changing for everyone.
Yeah.
And then we went up there for the 4 Crown with Kyle, and it was the first time he was at the track. And you know, you had a buzz of, yeah, this kid's going to do good, but no one expected that. And he won that race. I want you to tell me about him coming along and driving the car, and then we'll get back to this car that's sitting here and why it's sitting here. So when did you first, I mean, did you hear about him way before you ever met him, or was it just, this is a new hot kid and here he goes?
Yeah, we had a swing out through Iowa, and we were running Knoxville, Iowa, and we had Darren Clayton running for us at the time.
I really enjoyed watching Darren.
Everyone
liked watching him. Everyone that didn't have to work on him liked watching him.
And Darren is, I mean,
that's
just naturally talented.
That's another one we can talk about for a half hour.
Oh yeah. Anyway, Richard. So this would have been like really in the infancy of streaming races.
Okay.
And it was Rob and I and Rob's son AJ and Tim Wechter. We went out and did this. I think it was like a 3 or 4 race swing that we did, and we were running Knoxville, and Darren, I don't know what happened. He got up over the curb into one and just flipped his ass off and tore the hell out of our car. I kind of knew some of the guys from running around Knoxville. I helped some guys, local guys like Tom Whiting and Mike Reinke around the Knoxville area when them guys were running local there. And I had knew some of the players that, you know, did car repair and that kind of stuff. So I went over and talked to a couple of the guys, and we got to go to, it's called Jocko's Auto Parts. They have a sprint car shop in Des Moines.
Okay.
But as we were leaving, Richard and Rob were on the phone, and Richard said, well, my next call's to or maybe he had already called Darren and said, you know, we're done.
Yeah.
And Richard didn't like to do it that way. I mean, he wanted to, if he was going to fire a guy, he wanted to do it in person and do it right, you know.
Cool.
But he was also, he didn't want them to hear about it from somebody else.
Yeah.
He wanted to be the one to tell you that you know, that's it, we're done for now.
Yeah.
And so he called Darren and relieved him of his duties, and we were leaving the track, and we're kind of trying to think about, you know, who to run for us, and Hod had run for us at Eldora, Jack Hodenshield, and he had run pretty well at Oskaloosa, and so I was kind of advocating him, and our buddy Jamie Miller, him, and he works for his brother Larry Miller up at Ham Signs, and I had called Jamie, and he said, well, what do you think about Kyle Larson? And I'm like, yeah, I think he just won Belleville for Keith, didn't he? He said, yep. Yeah, he's a shoe. I said, all right, well, do you have his number? And he says, well, he happens to be standing right here. So he hands Kyle the phone, and Kyle had brought his stuff. He was coming out, I think going to run some here in Ohio or something, and he brought his stuff, and but he didn't have a seat.
Okay.
So I said, here's Richard's phone number. I gave him Richard's phone number. I said, you guys call Richard and you guys talk it out, get it figured out. So that's the way we left it when we left Knoxville. We didn't really know kind of where we were going. All we knew is we had a tore up damn race car, and
yeah.
We needed to work on it. Well, luckily, I believe Oskaloosa was a Tuesday night, and I think that was a Saturday night we crashed at Knoxville. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Or maybe it must have been a Saturday.
Yeah.
So we busted out. We had that car completely stripped out at Jocko's out in their parking lot.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that people don't really think about. I mean, when you're out on the road, you're lucky if you get a shop to work in.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's out in a parking lot somewhere in the
Hotel,
blazing sun.
Motel parking lot.
Motel parking lot.
That's what it is.
Yep. So we were, we worked all day. We got up early, got up there, worked all day. Them guys were great. One of the guys, Booby Thompson is his name. He, old racer from back in the day around Knoxville. I remember watching him. Like I said, when my dad would take me to Knoxville, I remember watching Booby run, and just a great guy and helped us out. And Rob, of course, doing a lot of the good fabricating, and we got this thing back together. It looked a little rough. I mean, it was she wasn't no peach, that's for sure. But we got it back together. In the meantime, Kyle and Richard had spoke, and
How old was Kyle at this time? Was he early 20s? Was he 21 yet?
so I'm guessing maybe 18, 19.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I mean, he was a
I'm
kid.
not real sure. He was, and he.
And
I mean,
looked like it.
to this day, he still don't look real. Yeah, he looked like he was about 12.
Yeah.
He's just a young kid.
Yeah.
But was there with his mom and dad.
Yeah.
And they had made plans to come over. We were staying at Pella, and they made plans to come over and put the seat in the car. He didn't have a seat. He had to borrow one from Brad Sweet.
Okay.
I believe Sweet at the time was running for Casey Kane.
Okay.
So they crawled up, got the seat out of Sweet's backup car, and for whatever reason, it ended up not working out.
Okay.
That Kyle could come over while we were at Pella, and so he comes. So well, we'll just put it in at the track. Okay, I mean, when you go through as many drivers as we were,
Oh yeah.
you know,
we can do this between heat races if you want.
I often said that we were good at doing bad things, which was changing seats and changing motors. You know, I mean, it was some things you just didn't want to be good at, but
Yeah.
unfortunately we were. But so anyway, we put his seat in it, and or Brad's seat in it, and he went out, and he one of the things that very much impressed me was he really wasn't too focused on the car. I'm not sure if that's because he wasn't familiar with this, or if he was, maybe a little shy or whatever.
Yeah.
But he went out and hot lapped, and Oskaloosa was notoriously hard on tires. And we let Terry McCarl know about it. Yeah, poor Terry had to put up with us quite a bit.
Had Kyle been in a sprint car once or twice by then? I saw him win at Brown. I know that was a different guy. That was Bell, I think. Had he been?
So I think out in California he
Okay,
had run some, but I'm not real.
But not much.
I'm not real sure. Yeah, not a lot. I
Couldn't
don't
have
believe.
Yeah.
I really didn't know that much about him. I mean, I heard his name running for Keith, but I didn't really even know how much he run midgets for him.
Yeah. How many kids does Keith have? running
Yeah,
for him?
exactly. Yeah. So he goes out and he hot laps and comes in, and I mean we were pretty good,
Yeah.
but it's readily apparent that this kid's got it.
Really?
I mean,
Right away.
And
Wow.
I don't remember if Rob told me or if I was standing there just when Kyle had told Rob, he's like, I really don't care what you do, just kind of tell me what you think it's going to do for the car. Kind of give me some idea, of what I should. It'll be a little bit tighter on entry. It'll be a little bit freer through the middle, whatever.
Yeah.
Just so I can kind of prepare myself for what I need to do.
Yeah.
And like I said, Oskaloosa is hard on tires, and there were some times that you would go through both rear tires just hot lapping.
Jeez.
It was just,
Goddamn.
yeah. It was terribly expensive to run there.
Yeah.
We made a lot of money there, but we probably give most of it back to Hoosier so we can keep tires on the thing. But anyway, and they also ran that 2 heat race format. And I had asked, we had went out and ran pretty well, maybe even won it, I'm not sure, the first heat or whatever they called it. And we're getting ready for the qualifier, and I kind of look around. I wanted to, because Kyle, we had talked about maybe cutting the tire a little bit to maybe try and release some heat.
Yeah.
And I had kind of looked around. I wondered where he went to, and I said, I asked, some of the guys on the crew, I was like, did you see where he went? No, I don't know. I knew he knew Tracy and Krista Hines a little bit, so I thought, well, maybe he went to their trailer because he's a little familiar with them or whatever, may feel a little more comfortable. I walked down there, nowhere to be found. I'm like, where'd this kid go? I mean,
Yeah.
can we not think about what we're doing here? And actually, the whole time he was up in front of the truck, he nosed the truck up to the fence, and he was standing up there watching the track, and I just didn't walk around the corner and look to see if he was there.
He was doing his
But
homework.
he was doing his job.
Wow.
I mean, he was just standing there, and he just watched that track and watched that track and watched that track. Brady had won at Knoxville, and we had flipped with Clayton. Brady had won that race at Knoxville, and them big flat halves, Brady's pretty tough. He's good. And we went out. Kyle was leading it, running the top of 1 and 2, and the top of 3 and 4, and the bottom of 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And
It's funny how that sometimes is a quick way around.
Yeah.
You see it a lot in dirt racing.
yeah, and Kyle just not knowing, sometimes you just don't know. When you're leading, you kind of do what you did to get there, and you don't, until you feel pressure, you don't really hunt around much. You might just get up there and run it unless you can feel yourself slowing down or you think you need to go look somewhere. So anyway, it started taking rubber on the bottom. And Kyle kept running the top, but Brady kept getting closer and closer and closer, just running the bottom of 3 and 4. And Brady had passed him, and they had a red flag. And at the time, we had open reds. Okay. And I can remember my cousin Tony was there, and I think my cousin Jason, I'm not sure, but we had ran an electrical cord from the trailer. We strung like 3 electrical cords together so we could grind our tire to try and keep it from sealing over because it was so hot. Well, fortunately, Kyle didn't find the rubber as early as Brady did. Oh. And there were actually guys, I don't remember at what point in the race we were. I don't think we were halfway, but maybe we were close. And there were actually guys starting to change tires because their tires were obviously not going to make the distance.
Yeah.
Brady had found the rubber earlier and was leaning on his tire, catching Larson. And
if you change a tire on that open red, do you
go to the tail?
Go to the tail.
Go to the tail.
Okay.
The deal is, at the time, you did not lose a lap or anything, so you just went to the tail. So that fresh tire was obviously worth a lot. Yeah. And we were standing there running second.
Yeah.
Having to think, okay, the guys like up to 10th or 8th had changed tires.
Wow. So
you're thinking, yeah, these guys are coming.
And they're not slouches.
No. Yeah. Guys like Coons and, them guys, they changed tires and went to the back, and you're saying, Levi, I think, was one of them,
wow.
And you're just thinking, but
wow.
Running second, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Yeah. You can't take yourself out of second to go to the tail.
Yeah.
So, but we had good tire left. We were still good. And I remember, Rob's like, we went and looked at Brady's tire, and, his tire was more than half gone, and we still had like 3/4 of ours.
Wow. Okay.
And Rob's like, just pressure him. Don't do anything crazy. Just pressure him, and
lean on him,
we'll be fine.
Yeah.
And they dropped the green flag, and Brady had slipped just a little high to hit the rubber. And Kyle turned the thing, and there was a strip of moisture down the infield. And he turned that thing and put the rear tires on that moisture down there and just drove right past him.
Damn.
On the restart. We're
That's
thinking,
awesome.
What part of following him and put pressure on was that?
That was a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
That was a lot of pressure quick.
But he, the thing got, so it started taking rubber in 1 and 2 as well. And the thing got really tight. And what was really impressive was he modified his line. He would not charge the corner so hard so that he could turn it in the middle, and he kind of was a little bit higher at the apex of the corner, and he would turn it and just make that back straightaway really long.
Yeah.
And not slide the tires.
Yeah.
And he would run by, and you could carry a conversation when he went by in the middle of the backstretch, and the rest of them guys are going by, just on the pipe, just killing it,
wow.
And he just worked it, and it was something.
Damn. That's first night in the car.
Yeah.
Wow. Unreal.
Yep.
Unreal.
Yep.
And then now, how soon was the 4 Crown after that? Was it the next year or that year?
So that would have been August, and the 4 Crown typically is September, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So.
Okay. And he had never been to Eldora.
He had never been. And he was going to run for Keith in his midget and his Silver Crown car. And we took the same car. And I can remember when we got to Eldora, he then had his seat. So we had to mount another one.
Cool.
And
he rolled into Eldora on Friday night and saw the place.
Yep.
Got to watch a race.
Yep.
Jeez.
And he actually went out, I believe, sprint cars were first. So his first time was in an on-wing sprint car at Eldora.
Jeez.
And
talk about being thrown to the wolves.
Yeah, exactly. And we were mid-pack. Just not all that good. But Eldora has its little nuances, and it's not something you can pick up. And from what I understand, Kyle learned a lot of this stuff by playing video games.
Really? Yeah, that's a new thing.
Trying to learn. Yeah, exactly. That's just something we're not accustomed to.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And so he learned a lot. His first laps were out there hot lapped and qualified a sprint car, and we were mid-pack. around Eldora, if you're going to run Richard's car, you're going to run the fence. I mean, that's just, he's not going to hire somebody that's going to run the bottom.
Yeah.
And you got to be where you're going, where it's right. And he did a very good job. Then he got in Keith's midget in this champ car and got some more laps.
Yeah.
And goes out in the heat race. I don't remember what we did. Transferred, obviously.
Okay.
And started the feature, and he just kept getting more laps and more laps, because I think they ran the midget feature first, and then the sprint feature, and then the champ cars.
Yeah, that's good, because he would have been comfortable in the midget.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been in this before.
Yeah, I've been here before, so now I can focus on the track.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he just kept, in the sprint car, he just kept getting better. He'd won the midget race.
Mm-hmm.
And just every lap, just getting more confident and putting the car where it needed to be, and doing what he needed to do. And I can remember coming down, like with 5 to go, I think there was a yellow, and I don't know where we were, but a couple of the guys that were standing there with me, Jeremy Perdue and a couple of these guys, I was like, if he wants to win this thing, he can do so.
Yeah.
And I kind of said it thinking, it'd be great, but that's,
asking a lot.
Asking a lot for a kid. Yeah.
First time here.
And sure enough, man, I mean, they dropped the green flag, and he sails her off into one and ends up winning. I mean, it was unbelievable.
God,
I think
awesome.
I don't remember if he passed on 2 to go or the white flag lap, but I mean, it was just unreal.
Yeah, we were down in 3 and 4 watching from there.
Yeah.
And then the champ car, he went out, and that was a tire race. Everyone kept blowing tires. Like 5 different guys that were leading blew right rears.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the nights that everyone was blowing tires.
Yep.
And he outlasted.
Yep.
That car that he won in, the sprint car, he won for you guys more in that car, and it kind of became almost like his perfect record car. Every time he'd sit in it, he'd do good and win.
Yep.
And then either the next year, I think it was the next year, or the following year at Four Crown.
Yeah, I think we went back to Oskaloosa.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Terrible. You don't remember more of this stuff.
Yep. And then
but I think we won Oskaloosa again.
Yep.
And then went back to Eldora, and then that's when he crashed it.
Yeah, took a ride.
Took a
and it was
big
a spooky ride. I mean, anyone who watches sprint cars knows.
Yeah.
The worst way you can crash is if you start flipping and someone hits you and hits you in the cage, and it happens.
Yeah.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, and poor Wes Miller had nowhere to go, and he just.
Yeah.
I mean, it just
happened.
one of them deals, And
it was such a. Unfortunately, in sprint car racing, the thought of that kid will be good if he survives is a real thing.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And there was many people that thought, well, that was the end of Kyle.
Yeah.
It was that bad, And you watched the video and the place went silent.
Yeah.
You just knew, it wasn't good.
A lot of times when we would start a race, we would have our equipment ready. USAC would tell us where we needed to pit. We would have our spare tires ready. And then typically when they throw the green flag, I would go start getting the trailer, put things away so that when we were done, we could get loaded up and get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And so I was literally in sweeping the trailer, because it was pretty early in the race. It wasn't much more than about 5 laps maybe or something. And I walk out, the red flag come out, and I'm like, go see what we need to do.
Yeah.
And go walking out, and I don't remember who was pitted next to us, but I'm like, what happened? And they just looked at me, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
What happened?
Jeez.
And they just didn't want to say anything because it was such a vicious hit. And so I walked down towards turns 1 and 2, and I could start seeing neon orange pieces just scattered everywhere.
Jeez.
And then I see the car laying there just
bent.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh dear Lord.
Yeah.
And Richard and Rob unfortunately been through it a couple other times with and just horrific. And luckily when he crawled out from there, I mean, it was just like, oh
yeah,
thank you.
And he crawled out fine.
Thank you, Lord.
Wasn't limping, nothing.
Yeah,
geez.
He ended up having to go to the hospital just for observation.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, I mean, it rattled him up a little bit.
Unreal.
But because he was going to run the champ car, and his mom and dad tried to talk him. His dad ultimately, I think, ended up talking him out of running the champ car.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just took the big one of your career. Let's think about this.
Let's sit back and
well, that car,
calm down a little bit.
That car, you said bent. I mean, it got destroyed and broke. I mean, broke damn near everything in the car.
Yeah.
And it came back here, and I remember the time, I'm restoring cars for Ken Kaiholtz, Machine Gun Ken.
Yeah.
And almost immediately, it was very soon, Ken asked me, like, what do you think about, how bad is that car? And I said, oh, I'm sure it's junk. And we kind of talked, and I told Ken, I said, Ken, you ought to think about trying to get that car. And he said, why? And I said, man, that's Kyle Larson's perfect, winning car. And think about in 20, 30 years to have Kyle's car.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good car. And Ken said, well, do you think it can be fixed? And I said, well, for collection purposes, yeah.
Absolutely.
We're not going to go try to race it, but let's see if we can put it together. And I remember I called you and said...
Yeah, I remember you texting and calling and
said,
keep everything.
Keep everything. Everything, even the most broken, bent Heim joints, whatever, throw them all in a box and keep them with the car.
Yeah.
And just throw it all in a pile, and we're interested in that car.
Yeah.
And then I know Ken and you guys and Richard, you guys haggled over, what was going to happen with the car. And then it eventually happened. Ken got the car, and then the job of trying to straighten it and put it back together.
Yep.
And I wanted no part of it because I don't know new cars.
Right.
I could hobble it together, but not the correct way. And Ken asked me numerous times, and at that time, my buddy Joey Kerr had been fixing a lot of cars up there at his shop.
Yep.
And I knew he was in Indy, and he might be, have helpers up there that would know the car. What ended up, I know it went to Joey, and then what happened with that? The guy that originally built the car got involved, didn't he?
Yeah. His last name escapes me. Todd was his first name.
Okay.
Him and his dad built cars. Tremendous fabricator, welder. That thing, as vicious of a hit as it took, as bent as that car was, not one single weld broke.
Really?
It was impressive.
I remember Joey telling me that.
It was impressive.
Because Joey's fixed so many cars, he knows what to look for.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me,
he did.
This is a car to study.
He did such a fabulous job. He freehand built that car working for Spike. The car came...
so there was no jig used, it was just a freehand?
Yeah. I'm not sure if he had any fixtures at all for the side or not, but I think he pretty well freehand. No, yeah. It was a kind of a one-off. The car, so Wayne Simmons had kind of slowed down in production, and we weren't really able to get any more cars from Wayne, and Tom Chalk had started building cars. And Tom had changed some things, and we're always, Tracy Hines called it tinkeritis. Yeah. Always wanting to do things and just make it our own, and so we sat down and put a car together. I drew out the car, and we went through and put tubing thicknesses, stuff like that, and got everything, the way that we wanted it built, or the way we thought we wanted it built, and sent it up to Todd and the guys up at Spike, and they put it together, they built it, and did a wonderful job, and we called it a chalk car.
Yeah.
And I remember we rolled that thing out, I guess that had to have been early 03. Jerry run it in Florida, and we just didn't go real well. And we come back and we ended up parting ways with Jerry, and then I don't know, we went through a group of drivers, Darren Hagan, and who was a lot of fun to run with, and Clayton, and Tracy may have been running a truck at the time, maybe might have sat in a few times, and and we were just trying to find the right fit, and ended up with Larson in it. It was definitely a good car.
That's excellent. and Joey was able to get it straight enough.
Yeah, he did
to bring it back. And
he did a great job.
He literally the way the collector cars work. We had to treat it like an old vintage Indy car. To make a car, the actual car, you're supposed to save like 60% of the original chassis. And it was a struggle to save 60% of the chassis.
Yeah.
You guys did good, and now it's here in the shop, and Ken has hired you to put it back together?
Yep. We had talked to Richard. I really don't have anywhere to work on it of my own, a shop of my own to work on it.
Yeah.
I'd kind of bowed away from the racing deal, stopped after I think it's 16, and went and did my own deal. And then I come back. I still here in the Milford area, Loveland area where the shop is, and we started running just, occasionally down at Lawrenceburg with some guys, and we Richard and I kind of got back clicking again, and then Ken took the car and took it up to Joey Kerr and got it repaired. And then Ken, we kind of talked about doing it, and we'd had some other cars that got taken and put back together to supposedly be a Hoffman car, and guys did a good job, and I don't want to knock their work. It was, they did a fine job, but it was just when you looked at it from me knowing how I put cars together and how Richard and Rob put cars together, they weren't Hoffman cars.
And I told Ken that. So, man, the guys that built this car, with the vintage Indy cars, we're dealing with book record and photographic record.
Right.
The guys that built this Kyle Larson car are sitting right here.
Right.
Let's have them do it.
Right. And to me, that's kind of a neat thing. And now that Richard has passed, I really want to. When Richard was still alive, I was trying to figure out, because he said he wouldn't paint it. And most people don't know, but Richard painted all the cars.
Yes.
He would spend countless hours over there just sanding,
That's
and he would sand literally until his fingers bled.
Yeah.
And
did all his own paint work, custom paint work.
Yeah. He'd have guys like you come stripe it, and Larry Miller and that. But kind of one of the things that kind of our cars, Richard's cars always look good.
Yeah.
I mean, it. And so I was trying to figure out how I was going to get Richard to paint the car.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just get, we'll get the thing built, and then I'll try and con him into it a little at a time or whatever. And unfortunately, he passed away. So now, hopefully, I would still like to do it in-house, all of it, because we did everything here, from building the body panels. We did our own carbon fiber work. Just I would like to get that car. So not only is it and Richard wouldn't like this, but not only is it a tribute to Kyle and his amazing feat of winning the 3 races at Eldora, and not to mention the other races that he won in it as well, but also kind of a tribute or a shrine to Richard, just as he would do it.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. He would never want to do that. But it's going to happen anyways.
Yeah. He was always, he didn't like cars like that. I mean, Joey Kerr proved you could get it back together and run it, but it wasn't worth the effort, other than a historical
Correct, yeah. And
reason.
It is a very historical car. That's cool. Man, thank you.
All right, man.
It's amazing.
It's been fun.
It has. We could sit here and talk for hours, but I know you got work to do on this Kyle car that's sitting here.
Yeah.
Man, thank you.
Thank
you. What, real quick question, because I know I've had tons of people ask me. Do you know any plans for the Hoffman car, the Mean Green team, any of that? Is it just business as usual?
I don't. Rob has talked some about running it.
Okay.
He is very busy, him and his brother Chris as well. Richard had a lot of irons in the fire. I mean, he was busy. He worked more than anybody I knew.
Yeah.
He would work. He never got up real early, but he'd be there working at 3 in the morning. And a lot of times he'd come here, and we were talking about body work. He would just come here and, work. I'd go home at midnight, 1 in the morning. He'd go to his office and work 2-3 hours.
Jeez.
Wow.
Wow.
So Rob and Chris are trying to get that going, and Chris is working to get his broker's license, and they had a subdivision that they're working on to get going.
Yeah.
So he's just got so much going, and Rob's daughter has some health issues, and she's coming hopefully to the end of that and getting on the right path, and so he's just got a lot going.
Good.
So hopefully, the plan was this year to run the car with Brady down at Lawrenceburg, and then when Richard passed, we come and kind of put it in the condition you see now. We got it backed off, and we had guys like we're going to run just like 3 races. We had a couple of the guys kind of like the core group when I started here, Tim Wolfram and Jeremy Perdue and Mark Ashbrook. We were all just and Richard and I just go down and run it, and Tim Wechter and just have some fun with it.
Yeah.
And it was fun. The year we did it, we did have fun.
Cool.
But you realize that you kind of never lose that competitiveness, and all of a sudden you're back to spending more time over here than you should, instead of focusing on my business and what I need to
that's
do.
That's very true. When in 2000 I retired, if you want to call it, from racing to modified.
Yeah.
And we kept playing with race cars and stuff, but people would ask, well, why don't you just run the car when you're available? And I said, you can't do that. Your brain won't let you do that. It's either all in or all out. And if you try to do that halfway stuff, it's just...
It don't work.
It don't work. You're going to be pulled in every direction. It just doesn't work.
You're going to run like you're halfway.
Yeah. And I mean, exactly. And to Brady's, effort is awesome. The car's out there, and it's
unbelievable.
I mean, he's right there. He's kicking ass, and
the
Hoffman name's out there on the USAC tour right now, kicking ass.
Yeah,
and that's awesome.
Yeah, and that was the advantage to having Brady do it. We had kind of looked around. Everybody calls him Cowboy. Tim Wolfram. He did, put the schedule together and who could maybe drive it, or Brady's doing this and this and this. Who can we get to run it? The advantage is, to a guy like Brady who does it all the time, he could bring that knowledge of what he needs, and he's currently running XXX cars. That's what we got. But little things change, tires, shocks, stuff that if you're not out there every night, we never really got rolling until PA, when we go out to Pennsylvania and do the swing through Pennsylvania, and just get to spend 4, 5, 6 nights working on the car, racing every night.
Yeah.
And then you really learned what your package was, and it kind of built momentum going into sprint week, where you could really get rolling again, and just, put your nose down and dig.
Man, that's cool. That's cool. Well, good, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one. I'll see you soon.
All right.